This is Don Drysdale. No matter what sport you participate in, there's little to equal the feeling of winning. It doesn't matter how often you win, it's always a thrill. But it's especially exciting when the contest has been close. Today, I'll tell you about one of the closest. This program is brought to you as a public service of this station on behalf of your local Army recruiter. Today's Army will teach you a skill requiring high technical proficiency. In today's tight job market, the Army has many openings right now. See your local Army recruiter and get the details. Now, today's story. It's about the great shootout of 1874. Year after year, the British teams dominated the sport. But in 1873, an upstart team of Irish farmers upset the British and won the international title. But the Irish weren't content to wait for challengers to come to them. Instead, they decided to go to the challengers. So they invited the United States to a World's Championship rifle competition. Well, the United States has never been in a match like that. In fact, we didn't even have a team. Of course, that didn't stop us from accepting the challenge. I guess everyone figured that we could take care of a little detail like putting a team together later on. The National Rifle Association was only 3 years old. They accepted the challenge from the Irish champions, and Creedmoor, Long Island, was chosen as the place. Now we had to find a team. Each man on the 8-man team would shoot 7 times on each of 3 ranges. The distances would be 800, 900, and 1,000 yards. Now those are long distances even by today's standards. Using old muzzle loaders, each man would shoot the distance of 3 football fields laid end to end at a target made out of an 8-inch disc of white paper. The Americans were worried. They had to find a team and get organized fast, and then they made the wisest decision that they could have made, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. First, here's something to help you make a wise decision about today's Army. The Army travels on its stomach. And this saying is as true today as it was 200 years ago when our nation and the U.S. Army were just getting started. Today's Army needs cooks. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. Help today's Army travel and join the people who feed the Army. Now back to our story. It's about the first international rifle competition the United States ever participated in. The champion Irish shooting team of 1874 had challenged the United States to a match. The man who became captain, trainer, recruiter, and equipment manager of the Americans was General George W. Wingate. Wingate was a master sharpshooter and a champion of the repeating rifle. He promptly named 7 other men to a squad and equipped them with his new breech-loading rifles. There was practically no time to practice, to say anything about even getting acquainted. The Irish arrived in New York at the same time the Americans pulled in from different parts of the country. The Americans shook hands with the Irish and with each other, and the contest was on. It was September 26, 1874. Over 5,000 people showed up to watch the match. The shooting began. First, the Irish lead man squeezed off 7 shots, then the first American, and so it went all day. As the men alternated, the scores slowly rose. First the Irish led, then the Americans, and by dark there was a virtual tie. Finally, the last Irishman mused up his last shot. The Irish were leading 9:31 to 9:10. The entire match now depended on an American anchorman, Colonel John Bodine. He laid on the ground quietly. Not a muscle moved as he put his sight on the target 1,000 yards away. Bodine fired one shot after another until he had 1 bullet remaining. The score was now Irish 9:31, Americans 9:30. If he made his last shot, the United States would win. If he missed, they'd lose. The 5,000 spectators tensed up as the colonel got ready for his last shot. No one moved. No one breathed. He fired, and everyone waited. Then, from the scoring trench in the target area, the flag went up. Bodine had scored a bullseye, and America had won. The cheering crowd carried Bodine off the field on their shoulders. America had won its first shootout. This is Don Drysdale. Today's Army is still putting men and women in the winner's circle. See your local Army recruiter and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. It takes a lot to be a champion: determination, skill, training, and luck. Few athletes ever get to the point where they can honestly be called champions. It's a name earned by very few. Today, I'll tell you about a great champion, a man who's always been one of my favorites because he also had class. This program is presented as a public service of this station on behalf of your local Army representative. Today's Army has many jobs open right now, and they'll teach you the skills you need to do them now and in the future, too. See your local Army recruiter about careers in today's Army. Now, our story. It's about one of the best-known names in sports, John L. Sullivan. He is probably the most popular sports hero in American history. Newspapers called him the Boston Strong Boy, but he was a lot more than just strong. He was fast, and he was aggressive. He weighed about 200 pounds and stood 5'10". He wasn't known for his defense. That's because he didn't have any. Sullivan just attacked. He could knock out an opponent with either hand. If a punch landed on him, he just brushed it off and attacked again. But Sullivan hadn't intended to be a professional boxer. He knew he was good with his fists and enjoyed an occasional brawl, but he hadn't planned to fight for a living. Then he went to the theater with some friends in Boston in 1880. He was 21 years old. Part of the bill was a professional fighter named Scannell who challenged anyone in the theater to stay 3 rounds with him. Theater challenges were popular entertainment in those days, and usually the fight took place with a professional volunteer from the audience. This time, Sullivan climbed into the ring. Sullivan lasted the 3 rounds, but Scannell didn't. In the first round, John L. hit him so hard that he fell over the ropes and into the orchestra pit. After that, Scannell retired, and Sullivan took over the theater circuit. Sullivan began picking up some press coverage and added to his reputation when he defeated several ex-champions in exhibition matches. But Sullivan's first real test was still coming. It came in 1881 when one of the toughest street fighters in New York offered to fight him. And I'll tell you what happened between those 2 tough brawlers in just a moment. First, listen to this good news from today's Army. A challenge is getting hard to find these days. Most jobs are just sort of, well, ho-hum. Well, today's Army has got jobs to get you rolling. Jobs with all the challenge you can handle. Contact your local Army representative and check out a guaranteed Army job. Get a charge out of life. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. It's about the classiest boxing champion in America, the legendary John L. Sullivan. It was 1881. Sullivan had been boxing professionally in theaters, taking on all comers between the comedians and singers of the vaudeville stage. Up until then, he'd just been another act on the bill. Then he was challenged to fight John Flood, known as the Bull's Head Tear. Flood was a waterfront toughie, the leader of the most infamous gang in New York. He had never been beaten. They met on a barge tied to a dock in Yonkers and fought under the eerie glow of hundreds of gas lamps. Thousands of fight fans came to watch the action. The heavyweight champion, Paddy Ryan, was in the first row. It was a fight to the finish, but it didn't take Sullivan very long. He lowered his head and charged at Flood. The gang leader unloaded half a dozen strong punches. Every one of them landed on Sullivan, but they didn't even slow him down. Sullivan kept after Flood, throwing lefts and rights as a hoodlum backpedaled around the ring. The fight fans had never seen anything like it in their lives, and finally, after 16 minutes of brutal punishment, Flood was knocked out. Sullivan didn't even seem to be out of breath. He picked up the unconscious loser and handed the body to his seconds. Then he turned and smiled at the champion. "Ready for yours?" he asked with a smile. And a year later, Paddy was ready, and Sullivan knocked him out too. After the fight, Ryan said, "When Sullivan hit me, I thought a telephone pole had been shoved against me endways." Sullivan reigned as champion for the next 10 years. This is Don Drysdale. You'll be a winner if you enlist in today's Army. They've got some great ways to guarantee you of a job with a future. See your local recruiter soon and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. Although some professional athletes make a lot of money, they didn't get in sport for the income. They played for the fun of it. They enjoyed the competition. Today, I'll tell you about an unusual man who made a lot of money from sports without ever touching a ball or putting on a uniform. This program is brought to you as a public service of this station and your local Army recruiter. Today's Army will guarantee you of training in the job you want in writing before you enlist. Find out about this exciting career idea from your local Army recruiter. And now, today's story. It's about a young man who immigrated to the United States from Ireland in 1874. His name was Richard K. Fox. When he got to America, he only had a couple of dollars to his name. He got a job as a newspaper reporter, and in a couple of years he had saved $200. One day he gambled the entire nest egg on a small weekly newspaper that was about to go out of business. But he had a hunch that America wanted to read about sports, and no newspaper in the country had a sports section in those days. So he started a small column about what was going on in the sporting world, and circulation immediately began to pick up. That encouraged him, and in 1880 he decided to gamble again. He thought that people wanted sports news more than ever, and that they'd be especially interested in prize-fighting news. Boxing was illegal at the time, and it was hard to keep up with all the underground action. So instead of working on a regular edition of the paper, Fox decided to devote one entire issue to the world's heavyweight boxing match between Paddy Ryan of Troy, New York, and Joe Goss of England. He sent every reporter on the paper to cover the fight. 4 artists were dispatched to sketch the fight, the crowd, or anything else that they thought was interesting. They had lots to cover because the fight lasted for 87 rounds and Ryan won. When Fox's paper hit the newsstands, it carried the only coverage of the fight that was available, and it had ringside pictures. The demand was impossible to meet. Everyone wanted to buy the paper. They reprinted it and reprinted it again. Thousands of copies were mailed to the West Coast, then thousands more. They kept printing the same paper for weeks. It was one of the greatest success stories in American publishing history. The circulation boomed. Subscriptions came pouring in. Fox was on his way to become a millionaire. That newspaper is still printed today and still carries the latest news from the world of boxing. It's called the Police Gazette. But Fox wasn't done. He wasn't the kind of guy who sits back on his laurels. Instead, he came right back with a series of promotion that had all of America talking. I'll tell you about a couple of his innovative ideas in just a moment. First, let me tell you a little about today's Army. Some people claim they can build boys into men. Well, today's Army needs men for jobs boys can't handle: armor, infantry, or artillery. Tough jobs that test your stamina, strain your muscles, work your mind. Try out a man's job in Army combat arms. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. It's about a clever young publisher who bought a sagging weekly newspaper and turned it into an overnight success by devoting one issue to the then illegal sport of boxing. The man's name was Richard Fox, publisher of the Policeman's Gazette. He was a promotional genius. In 1893, the World's Fair opened in Chicago. It featured the world's first Ferris wheel and also a strong man named Sandow. Fox tried to get in on the fair's publicity by having a cast-iron model of the Ferris wheel built and then offering prizes to a strong man who could lift it. Of course, Fox found a strong man who could lift it. They called him Samson. And the next issue of the Gazette featured Samson in exclusive pictures lifting the Ferris wheel by crawling under it upside down. Another of Fox's zany ideas was to capitalize on a dive from the Brooklyn Bridge made by Steve Brody in 1886. While every newspaper in the country headlined the event, Fox hired his own diver, Lawrence Donovan, to jump off the bridge for a Police Gazette exclusive. Well, as you can see, Fox was a promoting fool. Richard Fox, one of America's most successful publishers, because he correctly understood America's interest in sports. This is Don Drysdale. Today's Army is interested in you. See your local recruiter and join the people who've joined the Army. Until next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. As the world of sports changes, more and more women are getting actively involved in athletics. Today, I'll tell you about a noted sportswoman who's got something better to do. This program is brought to you by the United States Army as a public service of this station. Today's Army has job openings right now for young men and women who are looking for a job with a future. Get the details from your local Army representative. Now, today's story. It's about a young woman who has decided to be a writer. She loves horses and is one of the finest equestrians in England. Someday she may ride professionally, although her only ambition right now is to ride in the Olympics, as her husband already has. She's a member of the British equestrian team and a leader in the grueling steeplechase and cross-country races. You know, riding is one of the great sports careers that has recently opened up to women. There's a shortage of jockeys in this country, and good riders are needed. A good jockey will make a lot of money. An average jockey won't. Riding a winner usually nets the jockey 10% of the winnings. Not bad for a fast ride. Top winners get $250,000 a year or more. On the other hand, second place may pay only $55, third place maybe $45. All other places pay somewhere maybe $35. So a winner can make some money, big money. But I'm getting off the subject. Perhaps the best-known horsewoman in England, this young lady specializes in the two hardest events in racing, and they're run back-to-back. First, it's the steeplechase, and it's a 2.5-mile race against the clock. There will be from 10 to 12 obstacles to clear. As the horse races around the course, it's seeing the jumps for the first time. The rider probably has walked around the course several times, but the horse must depend on the human for guidance. That makes the steeplechase an unusual event and a tough challenge. In 1973, this horsewoman was thrown over the head of a horse that refused to jump a water hurdle. She was only bruised in the fall, but narrowly escaped injury when another horse vaulted the barrier right behind her. At an international meet in Moscow, one of her teammates was thrown but got back on her horse even though 3 front teeth were missing and continued to ride. So it's a tough event. It's immediately followed by the cross country, a race that's so grueling that a doctor examines all the horses following the steeplechase before certifying them fit to continue. Then it's a 5-mile course with over 30 obstacles. Unless there is a perfect teamwork between horse and rider, it's a hopeless assignment. Last year, this rider came close to death, but she still won't quit. And I'll tell you about a girl with guts in just a moment. First, this word from today's Army. Many songs have been written about being in Europe during spring. The only problem has been getting there. Well, today's Army needs young men and women to live and work in Europe. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. Sing your own song in Europe this spring. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. The true story of a young lady from England who is working to be a top rider in Britain. Last year, as she rode the grueling cross country, her horse clipped the top of a hurdle and crashed against a tree. The girl was thrown off but caught the horse and climbed back on, not knowing that the stirrup on the far side had been ripped off. As her weight fell into the saddle, the horse took off, frightened by the fall and running headlong. All the rider could do was hang on. Slowly, she pulled herself up next to the horse's ear. She whispered to the frightened animal, then slowly, reassuringly, she reined it in, and the horse came back under control. It was a dangerous situation, but one which a good rider could overcome. She did. And I think she'll overcome some more, because she's a very determined young lady who says riding is one thing in the world that she does well. She said she'd much rather be with a good jumper than an educated diplomat. It's an unusual opinion, especially when it's offered by this horsewoman, Princess Anne of England. This is Don Drysdale, and you'll get the royal treatment when you visit your local Army recruiter. Find out about great careers for both men and women and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. What does it take to become an outstanding athlete? Talent, self-confidence, training, and a lot of luck. For a lifelong career, it takes a lot of all four. But for some people, it all comes at once. And I'll tell you about one fantastic example of one-time only super luck in just a moment. This program is brought to you as a public service of the station on behalf of your local Army representative. Today's Army will guarantee you have service overseas in writing before you enlist. Find out about travel opportunities from your local Army recruiter soon. Now, today's story. It's about a baseball player named Eugene Mercantelli. Well, you probably never heard of him. The reason is that Eugene was afraid his name was too long to fit in the newspaper headline or in a box score, so he changed his name to Gene Rye. The chances are that you never heard of him by that name either. But he certainly made headlines in one game in 1930 when every break a batter could get came his way in one fell swoop. It was August 6th, and Gene was playing in the Texas League. Waco was playing Beaumont. They weren't doing very well. Waco had gotten a few men to first base, but most of them had been stranded there after they got there. After 7 innings of play, Beaumont was leading 6-2. The Beaumont pitcher, Jerry Millette, had everything working, and he showed no signs of tiring. As the 8th inning began, a few fans got up and left the stadium. There didn't seem to be much hope for Waco. But that's when the sky opened and Rye became a statistic in the record books. He was the first batter leading off the inning. Millette's first pitch was inside and low. Rye was one of the league's best hitters, and even with a comfortable lead, he was a dangerous man to face. Then Millette's second pitch came right down the middle, fat and tempting. Rye hit it squarely and sailed it over the right field fence for a home run. Now it was Beaumont 6, Waco 3. It was still a comfortable lead, but Millette blew it. He walked the next batter, the next one singled, then he walked the next one to load the bases. Waco had enough men on base to tie the score, but there were no outs. The Beaumont manager had had enough. He pulled Millette, and another pitcher came in to relieve him. His name was Ed Green. Unfortunately for Beaumont, Green was just that, green. The inexperienced young reliever hit the first batter he faced, gave up a double to the next one, walked the next one, and then gave up a couple of more hits. By the time they yanked him, Green hadn't gotten a single man out and had given up a total of 7 runs. It was time for another pitcher, and this time Beaumont called an unfortunate left-hander named Walter Newman. What happened to Newman stunned the stadium, and I'll tell you about it in just a moment. First, here's good news from today's Army. A challenge is getting hard to find these days, and most jobs are just sort of, well, ho-hum. Well, today's Army has got jobs to get you rolling, jobs with all the challenge you can handle. Contact your local Army representative and check out a guaranteed Army job. Get a charge out of life. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to the story of good luck all at one time as it happened to Gene Rye in 1930. Rye's team, Waco, was leading Beaumont 10-6 after rallying for 7 runs in the 8th inning. Rye had slammed a homer to lead off the inning, and now he was up again, and there were still no outs. Rye checked the 2 runners and swung at the first pitch. Everyone watched in amazement, and it soared over the right field fence in the same place as first one had. 3 more runs scored, and Waco led 13-6. Newman finally retired a couple of Waco players, but not before several more runs had scored. And then, well, what do you know? Up to the plate for the 3rd time steps Gene Rye. Newman stared down from the rubber and began a long windup. He delivered. Rye smashed the ball with everything he had. This time, it went right up the middle of the outfield, splitting right down the middle. Up, up, up it went and out of the ballpark. It was the 3rd home run in 1 inning for Gene Rye. Waco scored 18 runs in that 1 inning, and never, never again did a hitter get so lucky all at one time. Today in Waco, they still talk about the mightiest batter of all time, Gene Rye. As for myself, I wonder if he wouldn't have just as soon spread his luck out over a little longer period, because the next year, Gene Rye retired from baseball. This is Don Drysdale. Your lucky day will be the day that you walk into your local recruiter's office and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone.